Hi, everyone. Welcome to Awakenings, the Archetypal Astrology podcast. Today, I'm here with Alex Stein and James Moran for a special episode. We're not going to do like a kind of transit forecast. In this one, there's some information about the transits that are happening right now in our previous episode with me and Alex and Ren. So check that out if that's what you're looking for. Today, we're going to talk about the trifecta of astrology, psychedelics, and meditation. So we often talk about the combination of psychedelic therapy or medicine work with archetypal astrology on this podcast. So that's a kind of central theme for us. But I just got back from a 10-day silent Vipassana retreat, and so I'm really keen to explore how meditation fits into this. And a thought that I had that distracted me from my meditation several times while I was on the retreat was that, I need to get Alex and James together to talk about this. We're all archetypal astrologers. We're all psychedelic therapy participants, and some of us are practitioners. And we're all really interested in meditation. So yeah, welcome. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having
me. So I mean, I guess I'll just throw it out there, like just to kind of generally set the scene, like to either of you really, whoever wants to start, of just like, yeah, how you see meditation fitting into this kind of paradigm that we're all participating in of psychedelics and astrology, and how the three fit together. Maybe like share some personal experiences with meditation and what it means to you, or what it's been like.
Yeah, you want to kick us off, Alex?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I can give you a little bit about my background and how I came into all of the practices that I do, including astrology. I'd say I first kind of got interested in the idea of meditation back when I was in college. And I think just one day I was kind of depressed, and I was just like walking through town, and I walked past the Zen center, and I was just like, and I like went in and I sat down, and I just assumed the position and sat there until the bell rang. And then afterward, a guy came up to me. He's like, "What are you doing? Like, do you even know what you're doing?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "All right, well, like, here's how you meditate." And then I didn't really follow it up all that much. But then again, like, I went into a depression after my sister died when I was 26, and I got Jon Kabat-Zinn's book, The Mindful Way Through Depression, and it started doing that practice, and that really helped. I mean, it cleared up my depression. I ended up not going on meds. It was good. I like adjusted very nicely. It was sort of the program of mindfulness will make you a more functional and productive and creative human being. And then I got kind of like, I read a little bit about TM, transcendental meditation. I actually had gotten kind of interested in that idea because I was like obsessed with the Beatles as a kid, and like a musician and everything. And so like I used to pretend to like meditate like because of the Beatles, I would like play meditate. And but I took up TM, again, which is kind of sold with the like, this will make you a more productive and worthy member of society kind of a thing that they do. And shelled out like $3,000 to learn what is, I later learned, is a very basic and simple technique that you can find in a lot of other ways. Nothing against it, it's a great technique. But yeah, and then kind of got into shamanic journeying with a drum, and that led me into becoming interested in psychedelics. And I had a bad trip back when I was like 18 that like I swore I would never touch a psychedelic again. But then, yeah, that kind of led me there. And around that time, I was getting interested in astrology, and it was like the first acid trip that I took. it was just like I was in the middle of reading Cosmos and Psyche, and I just found all of a sudden like I just spoke astrology. It was just like, oh shit, like it's there. It was like cool. And like after that day, I was just like obsessed and like learning it and starting to read charts and all of that. And probably like a year into my psychedelic journey, I had been like, for years kind of hearing about Kundalini, and I vaguely had it in my mind that awakening Kundalini equaled being on a permanent psychedelic trip. And I was like, sign me up. And so, I found a teacher who later became my mentor. His name's Raja Chowdhury, and kind of signed up for his mystery school and did some initiations into the practices that he teaches, which are a sort of combination of aspects of Kriya Yoga and Shakti Tantra, Shiva and Shakti Tantra, coming from like the Sri Vidya tradition and Kashmir Shaivism. And but I never stopped my psychedelic practice. And fortunately, he wasn't the kind of teacher who was like, you must give up this practice to do that practice. And as many teachers are, as pretty much anywhere you go, you're going to find somebody criticizing and telling you shouldn't do this other thing. But I always refused to kind of give up any aspects of my practice, and instead try to weave them together. And after taking up that practice, it changed everything. I mean, it just like, yes, my life did become more of a kind of ongoing psychedelic trip, but not in the cartoonish way that I imagine. It changed the nature of my psychedelic trips, like in a way that I could never have predicted. The psychedelic, and then I've ended up having this kind of ongoing dialogue between like immersing myself in a deep meditative practice for a period of time, maybe doing a sadhana to a particular deity, and then then doing a psychedelic trip at a certain time, and just like everything that I've been practicing just suddenly in that session just like coming online in this very powerful way, and then coming back and having to integrate that. And so it's like, I see why people say don't do it. I can speak to some of the things that I've gone through that I lead me to understand that, but I'm also very glad that I do it that way. It works for me. So anyway, that's kind of the rundown of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I mean, there's so many threads to pick up in there, especially like I definitely want to talk about how the role that meditation can play as a like a preparation and integration like tool or aid, and also I'm like really fascinated by the way the kind of the work that you do in meditation can also like change the quality of your psychedelic sessions, and also give you like tools and capacities that you develop in meditation, how they can help you to navigate those kind of spaces in the moment. So yeah, I'm kind of want to put a pin in all those things to like pick up the threads later. But yeah, like James, I'd love to hear, if you want to give us a similar rundown, or just say whatever you like about meditation, psychedelics, and astrology.
Sure. Yeah, so I also began becoming interested in a similar time frame, like in high school. I became interested in meditation. I actually became interested in spirituality in high school, and one of the first exposures I had to spirituality was the work of Stan Grof, which is all about psychedelics. So that was kind of my first interest. And I was actually, I think it was even before high school. I think I was like in junior high, and I got The Holotropic Mind by Stan Grof, and I read about the basic perinatal birth matrices, and I was like, that was a real eye-opening moment for me. And then I read his subsequent books and got really interested, but I couldn't really access the level of psychedelic healing that he spoke of, because it just wasn't, this was in the 90s, like early 90s, and it was just not, there wasn't the container and the frame that he had worked with in the 50s and 60s and a little bit in the 70s. And although he would come to DC, where I was raised, the Washington DC area, and do holotropic breath work workshops, and so I got to meet him and spend time with him and started practicing holotropic breath work, which was good. But I was really interested in the psychedelic part, and when I would try on my own, I would kind of just my adolescent recklessness would just kind of get me in trouble, and I wouldn't necessarily find what I'd read about in his works. And I got interested in meditation then, actually reading like Jack Kerouac, actually. I think it was like the Dharma Bums or something like that. And also I was raised in the heart of the Star Wars kind of fever. Like they came out, I think the first one came out in 77 maybe or something like that. I was born in 76. And then, I saw them when I was quite young, and then the subsequent two, which was the original trilogy, which is like A New Hope, and then The Empire Strikes Back, and then the Return of the Jedi. And so that one was all about like it's all inside you, like there's a kind of mystical connection to the universe that's inside. And so I was kind of like raised with that cultural exposure. So anyways, I asked my mother around my birthday when I was a teenager for books on meditation, and she got me a number of books, one of which was The Art of Living, which is by William Hart, but it's actually a kind of an adaptation of Goenka. S.N. Goenka wrote a book called The Art of Living, but it's like in Hindi, and it got adapted into English by William Hart. And so I got exposed to that. And then this was back in the day before any internet or anything like that. And so in the back of the book was a like an address. It's like, if you want to attend this course, you can like write to these people a letter. And I was like, man, if I'm going to learn because I had experimented with meditation that I'd read about in other books, mindfulness meditation practices, like I think it was a guy, Stephen Levine, maybe, or something like that, and so I was practicing on my own, but I was like, man, if I'm going to learn meditation, 10 days of silence, no communication, just focus on meditation, like that really seems like that you're going to learn it. And so I actually had to write a letter to the center in Massachusetts, and then I had to receive back an application through the mail, which I then had to fill out and send again to them, to then receive again in the mail an acceptance. And I was like 17 at the time, and I'm glad that they accepted me, because they didn't necessarily have to, because I was young. And so I went up there, and I basically like kind of hitched a ride and got up there and experienced my first 10-day Vipassana course, which was amazing, very difficult, but very good for me, because actually, backing up, one of the reasons that I became interested in spirituality and Grof and in meditation is because I was, like Alex mentioned, like I had no peace of mind. I was very agitated person. I was adolescent, which maybe carries its own agitation, but I was particularly disgruntled and stuff. Like kind of disturbed, not like crazy, but like I felt like my mind was a disturbed place. And so I got into those practices. And after that first meditation course, one, I felt proud of myself because I had completed a 10-day rigorous meditation course, which is no joke, so it was kind of a boost to my self-esteem. And then two, it did allow me to get some focus to my mind. It did allow me, I wasn't able to kind of reach the heights that they had described there. It was like kind of alien to me. It's just it's a kind of like a whole framework, whole well-developed framework that was totally new to me. But I did get some peace of mind. I got some focus, when I came back I still had to complete, I think, my senior year of high school, and I just had more focus. I could get my work done easier. I continued practice meditation. And then I went back for another one, and then eventually though I moved to the West Coast for college because Stan Grof was out there. Um, I got interested again in the psychedelic side. I kind of went back in that direction. But um it just wasn't happening in the 90s. There wasn't really, even being close to Stan, it wasn't, there wasn't the culture that there is today of prevalence of people who know about psychedelic assisted healing. And so then I decided to do a study abroad in India, my college. I went there. I got really into yoga. I took up Vipassana again, and I decided like I'm just gonna, focus on the meditation path because the psychedelic path isn't really happening. And I did that for uh, like a decade and a half, and I came back to Stan's work very unexpectedly through the route of archetypal astrology, which I never would have ever imagined. Or you know what I mean? Like I had this childhood friend who said like, "Oh, you should check out astrology, this and that," and he's explaining it. Um, and I'm like, astrology, like it seems like so archaic to figure out the positions. And then on top of that, why? Like why look at something so far away? It's like it's like it seems like it's the ultimate, gives the ultimate wiggle room for total projection and stuff because it's just something so far away. You can just say anything, you know. And no, he was like, no, you got to read this book. It's great. It's called Cosmos and Psyche. And so I picked it up and I read it. And then that and reading The Holotropic Mind from Grof, those were two very Uranian moments in my life. Because when I read it, it's just like everything was coming into high definition. Like, it's like 500 pages and I read it in like, I don't know how many days. I just hardly turned away from it. And then I found out that the author was a colleague of Stan Grof. And at the time I was living in Oakland, California. So not only did I find out that, but I found out that they both taught at Esalen and at CIAS, which are essentially almost like down the street. And so I started studying with them, at Esalen at CIS. And then I was just like off to the races, like archetypal astrology all the way, still practicing Vipassana meditation, and then also through CIAS, and then later on through the whole rest of the world, like getting exposed to actual psychedelic assisted healing because the culture had changed. When I first got exposed to Rick's work in 2008, 2009, it was really only CIS where the culture was like vibrant of like psychedelic assisted healing, but it wasn't long before the whole rest of the Bay Area. And then, everybody, like articles started getting published, all the research started coming out. So then it's just off to the races. So those three practices, those are like my pillars.
Yeah, awesome. I remember when I was first kind of getting into psychedelic therapy and starting to practice astrology. And I had much, I won't keep flogging a dead horse because I've had much similar experiences with Cosmos and Psyche to you guys, and it's a familiar story. We don't need to like hash that all out 3 times in a row. But yeah, I remember just making contact with you, James, and yeah, it was probably just before I was about to go on my first Vipassana, and I remember, yeah, the tangible sense of you being very happy. Uh, it's like, yeah, those are my things, man. Archetypal astrology, psychedelic therapy, Vipassana meditation. Um, yeah, that's a good way to go. Um, and yeah, I mean, for my part, um, I think, yeah, without rehashing the whole story of how I got into astrology and psychedelics, basically that's like uh, through being really interested in Jung and trying to write a book about Jung, and then kind of that all falling through, the book deal that I had and all working out. And just as that was happening, I kind of got an email from Ren about his course in astrology, and by that point I'd read Cosmos and Psyche and was into it. So I thought, hey, yeah, let's just do this, and it kind of propelled me in that direction. And honestly, I have always been interested in meditation, and I remember at university somebody giving me like a guided meditation CD, um, that I did every morning for like, I don't know, a month or 6 weeks, and then like put aside and never did again. But I remember in those 6 weeks, definitely thinking I am much better off while I'm doing this. And then, yeah, and then my kind of experience of meditation has been very sporadic. Um, since then, kind of up until my first Vipassana retreat, which was, I don't know, two and a bit years ago now. And yeah, honestly, I've tried to keep up the practice in the intervening period, with some success and a lot of not success. And yeah, I recently went and did my second 10-day, and I used to say, I think everybody who can safely do it should do a silent meditation retreat at least once. And now I say, I think you should do it at least twice. Because like once you've done it once, then like you're missing out on the benefits of that second time around. So yeah, again I'm in the, I kind of feel like I probably am not so, I've got my toes in the ocean of meditation. You guys probably a little bit more up to the waist, or fully fully floating on your backs.
It's always when it gets up to the waist that things get interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I don't know, like it's funny because all throughout my journey, whenever I've gone deep into anything, I've, something's been revealed to me, like maybe I made some breakthrough, gotten something that I didn't have before. And then I've looked and been like, oh man, like everybody needs to do this. Right. Or like, but something that I've found, like I've got a friend who doesn't need to meditate. He just he gets what I get from meditating by not ever fucking doing it. He can just be, and like it's cool. And so I didn't used to like to believe that, but more and more I just like want to admit to myself that sometimes people can be there. They can already, for whatever reason, have some kind of, maybe it's a subtle body structure already online. Maybe it's some part of consciousness is just integrated. You can think of it in terms of past lives, maybe, but you don't need to. Like, and anyway, it's interesting. So I just kind of, I guess why I say that is because, like, yeah, maybe I'm more experienced in meditation than you are and everything, but I don't know. You, for all I know, you could just jump in and get right to the same place like in 2 weeks. That
yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. There's also like a kind of theme that I want to pick up on, of like this general feeling of like permissiveness in meditation practice, and like how often these like schools of meditation, they're so old, that these ancient practices that we're like coming to as moderners and as Westerners, and often they can be quite prescriptive, and like Vipassana kind of goes to and fro between being permissive and being prescriptive, the way that it's taught by Goenka, in my experience. And it's there's very much a kind of like, oh, without condemning the practices that you've been doing up to this point, just put them aside while you're learning this practice. And you don't have to give up being a Christian or being an atheist or being a Hindu or whatever, but like at least give it a fair go by putting that stuff aside. And that's kind of what is said, but the subtext of it always is, you don't have to give up being a Muslim, but by the time you learn this technique, you probably will want to, like, so um and yeah, it's just a theme that's kind of relevant to this whole like area of like combining practices and the kind of situation that we find ourselves in. Like I like to think of it in terms of, and I'm trying to write about this at the moment, um like the spiritual path for each individual person as like a task of like piecing together what John Vervaeke calls an ecology of practices, you know, something that's alive. So an ecology, and like, you know, yeah, it's probably not enough for us for one reason or another just to do seated meditation. You know, you probably need like an embodiment practice of some kind as well. For example, you probably need to do some yoga or some kind of martial art, or just go running or play a sport or whatever it is. um, and then, you know, it also seems like we need kind of relational practices, and we need like depth psychological practices. So that might be where the psychedelics come in, or for some people it might just be talk therapy or active imagination, whatever. um, so yeah, I guess I'm just bundling up a bunch of stuff to roll across the table to you guys there in terms of like, yeah, how do you see it, the kind of the task of like being on a spiritual path, or like having a spiritual practice, you know, in these times, and um, the question of how to be really respectful and reverent towards um, the sacred itself and the ancient practices that we find, and the kind of traditions and the way that they're taught, whilst also being playful, being adventurous, being experimental, and like being empowered to put things together in the way that each person kind of sees fit. You know, there's a bit of a tension there. How do we navigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. What do you think, Alex? Do you want to dive in, or shall I? Or
I can dive in, yeah. And if I start to go on too long, because I got like too many thoughts on this, but start to go on too long, interrupt me. I've been thinking about this a lot because, as I said, I've really been drawn to a series of different practices that are sometimes seen to conflict with one another. I failed to mention how influential Jung was at the beginning for me too. And I remember when I started to get into psychedelics, one of my mentors in the Jungian studies that I was doing was kind of telling me, he's like, you know, the difference between it's really a different path than the kind of Jungian path. And I find that the people who take the psychedelic path are a little less deep than the people who do the Jung path. And I remember a part of me just being like, give me a break. Like, I'm not buying that, bro. And but then you know, I've also met people who do the psychedelic path who feel like everybody needs to do this, and like if you're not doing this, you're missing out on something that is fundamental to the human experience, and you can't grow without it, and you can't heal without it, and you can't know who you are without it. And I've also found that that's 100% not true.
Yeah, I just want to interject something just quickly. Like, meditation can be its own psychedelic.
Yeah.
Like we have to be careful of this idea that meditation is this like really passive thing.
Yeah.
That's just like, oh, you're just trying to bypass your emotions, or you're not doing deep psychological work. It's like, no, you go on a Vipassana 10-day. You're not going to do anything magical with your mind, or like take any weird substances, but you will expand your consciousness in a profound way and experience things very differently from how you normally experience them. So yeah, sorry, just thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean 100%, and like I think you guys would probably all be in agreement with this idea that like, you know, yes, these different practices perhaps they bring different gifts, or perhaps they bring some of the same gifts but in different ways, and and the power of overlapping them. You know, if I had to sum it up like really quickly, the way that I do the kind of dialogue between, say, psychedelic work and meditation work. And I should also emphasize that what I mean by meditation can run anywhere from like, you know, mindfulness practices are a big part of what I do, to anything from that to like, you know, blowing open my third eye and traveling through realms and stuff like that. So like, but anyway, the I consider psychedelic experiences, well, first of all, the ability to have a direct experience of something quickly that just launches you well past the kind of barriers that you have in your psyche that just won't let you, that you don't even know are there, and are keeping you from a certain experience that if you could just step over that line, you would get there. But something in you, when you're in a more or less normal state of consciousness, and you're trying to do it through meditation, you haven't made that connection yet. It's like you keep inching up to it and you can't see it, and it just keeps bouncing you back, right? Mm-hmm. That's the thing that I and I don't think everybody does, but I certainly needed it at a certain point to just like, I feel like it would have taken years and maybe never happened, for me to just go like, to get over that line and go like, oh wow, okay, so that's there, you know. And so in that way, like, yeah, it brings up all the healing, all the emotional catharsis, all of that, and also the introduction to transpersonal states, spiritual dimensions, whatever. And I see it essentially as like a Shakti pot, you know, like in the tantric tradition, you know, a guru can come and say like, touch your third eye and like give you a taste of a Kundalini awakening, right? And it works, it happens. If somebody's ready, and somebody who is vibrating at that level of consciousness comes and just transmits it, it can just take you by resonance right there. And but you know, you quickly learn that the Shakti pot's not the point, and people can get addicted to the Shakti pot. Like, oh, I got to go be around the guru. I got to, you know, I got to have him touch my forehead. I got to touch his feet. I got to, you know, and you start to associate the state with what you think gave you the state. And so for me, psychedelics are more and more becoming like a form of Shakti pot for me. Like it's basically something comes in my own being, right? In the being of being itself, right? Comes and taps me on the forehead and goes like, son, experience this now. And then it's up to me, you know, it's like it starts a wave in consciousness, and then it's up to me what I do with it afterward. And that's again where meditation can come in so handy, because like, you know, the idea of integration in psychedelics, it's kind of a vague thing. People will say like, oh yeah, don't forget to integrate. Yeah, oh, integration is really important. But it's like, what does that mean? I mean, integration means that like you've had an experience, and now you have to weave that into your life in a meaningful way that changes who you are from that moment forward. And to really integrate, you know, some of the deeper psychedelic experiences that I've had, it's really required me to kind of turn my sense of reality inside out in a number of ways. And meditation again really helps me do that, because, you know, if you want to take away all of the fancy doodads of meditation, just the basic skill of being able to sit there and observe whatever's happening, mm-hmm. Like, you know, it's Vipassana, but it's also like every indigenous society in the world has emphasized the power and importance of observation. I mean, like, you know, think of Native American trackers or hunters, or the Polynesian navigators or whatever. Like, these are people who could just sit and watch for hours, you know?
Yeah. There's something really like humbling about just trying to sit still, right? Which is like a really good counterbalance to the extremely dynamic and like potent, powerful experiences that people have with psychedelics. And on the I heard Chris Beisch say something about integration, which has really stuck with me, which I just want to throw out there as well, which is like, I'll try and say it right. the task in a way is not about taking, if you've had the universe drastically expanded for you by a peak experience of some kind, or you had like, um, kind of great spiritual truths revealed to you, or something like that. The task is not to grab all of that stuff and bring it inside the boundaries of your skin, so that you can own it. And so that the word integration is kind of misleading in that sense, because it feels like that's what you got to do, right? It's like, oh, I've had this experience, I need to get it inside me. But he said, it's more like you got to integrate yourself into the expanded world that you have discovered. And like that really helps me to understand what I mean anyway by psychedelic integration. Because it's
Totally.
like, okay, yeah, I live in a bigger world than I used to live in, and that is good. But if I don't do my integration, then I'm trying to do that thing of owning it and bringing it all inside and being the master of it, and that's when all of the bad things can happen. The kind of inflation that leads people to say integration is really important. Because we've seen, there's been so many cases where like people have failed to do that. But yeah, I kind of interjected there, Alex. I don't know if there was things you wanted to wrap up, or throw it over.
Yeah, well, there's one more thing that I wanted to say just on that idea of integration, because I completely agree. And I, the thing of surrender is really important, and I think fundamental to any practice, right? And you, in a psychedelic session, right, if especially if you're kind of following the Grof paradigm, right, surrendering to whatever occurs is really paramount. And I think that this is something where, again, where meditation really helps, and it helps with the integration process, because you realize that like you live in this expanded reality, and if you try to own it, or you try to grab all of that information or all of that whatever and just hold on to it, it just tears you to pieces, right? And it really, for me, the greatest integration learning has been around flow, around like what to hold on to when to let it go. And that's entirely a surrender process. And surrender entails a certain amount of discomfort, and meditation helps you learn to deal with discomfort, I think. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, what is all this bringing up for you, James?
There's some thoughts. I guess like maybe an entry point could be that, you mentioned the kind of prescriptive quality of Vipassana, but there's also a quality there of allowance. Vipassana is like got this sense like just live your life, don't really try to alter your life. Don't be extreme in any ways, which is hearkening to kind of Buddhism, like middle path. Just be aware of your sensations, essentially, is what Vipassana says. But at the same time, it's like meditate 2 hours a day, 10 to 10 day course once a year, volunteer. And so I guess I can see the point of why they want to do that, because they want, Goenka, for instance, or whoever dedicates themselves to the kind of the spreading the teaching of Vipassana, the practice of Vipassana, has gained something from it, and they gain something from it from dedicating themselves to a practice that they do for long enough that they have subtle enough awareness that they've cultivated in the present moment of the sensations, that they get a sense of insight into what is this thing called reality, like what is this experience of existence and reality. So that has a practical application that I feel makes Vipassana a very practical practice. At the same time, there's a tendency in the human psyche to go towards things that are certain, that have some type of certainty to them. Just, I think it's just an inbuilt part of our psyche because, I mean, it's obviously reflected in the archetype of Saturn, but it's an inbuilt part of our psyche because if things were kind of unpredictable and very Uranian all the time, it would be very hard for life to kind of get its footing and progress. So we kind of look for things that can settle the nervous system into a sense of like certainty. And that's just what human beings do when it comes to like a lot of what human beings do, like religion, like this religion, that religion, there's a certainty, there's a sense of certainty about the structure of life and what happens in the afterlife. But anything, schedules and anything that gives us a sense of real certainty, even sense of identity, like I'm a this and I do that, um, and so like Alex was saying, that approaching Vipassana, this is one of the reasons why, life just brought me archetypal astrology and psychedelic assisted healing. I never would have imagined that I would go into astrology. I was like one of those people that was more on the skeptical side, Um, and I think it brought it to me at a time to shake me up, shake me out of the kind of rigidity that I'd gotten into with Vipassana, where it's like you sit 2 hours a day, you tend to, which actually was beginning to become counterproductive because just like Alex said, like there's something beyond our habitual zone where there's a real growth opportunity. And sometimes like getting really into that certainty piece can kind of keep us from experiencing life's movement, wants us to kind of evolve alongside it. And so, the work with psychedelics and archetypal astrology came after a long tenure with Vipassana, which was great for me because I was able to, like in a course, as you know, it's like you settle down and you become really quiet and you're able to kind of observe sensations, and you're able to observe the mind, and you're able to observe what is perception in the present moment. You see like, oh, when I think of something or see something, a sensation comes up, which is tied to my interpretation of that thing. So it's either bad or it's good, or it's pleasant, or it's like really unpleasant. And it becomes, begin to see like, oh, okay, this is actually how perception happens. But we follow that thread, it becomes more, it actually becomes, this is how our world gets propagated. And so that was very helpful for me. The continuing on of the practice in a rigid way began to be less helpful for me. It began to be like I got exposed to archetypal astrology, and then I got exposed to, I came back to the work with Grof and psychedelics, and at the Vipassana courses, they didn't know what to do with that because there's one of the prescriptive pieces with Vipassana is around intoxicants. And they say like, those two don't go together. Like you can, if you're a Muslim or a Christian, you can practice Vipassana, just put aside your practice for those 10 days. And then again, you can come back to it. It's kind of like you said, Alex. I mean, kind of like you said, John, it's like, it's almost a sense of like, yeah, but it's like we're so confident in what we're selling that, you can go back to your old product, just try this product, but we know that you're going to be sold on this,
Yeah, and in fairness, one of the things they say is that like you don't you don't have to believe in reincarnation. It doesn't have to be your aim to escape the wheel of samsara, or to become a fully liberated person or whatever. Like those goals are there for those people who buy into it. But even if you don't believe in any of that, you start benefiting from the practice. Like the moment you start doing it,
Yeah.
you start to receive some benefits. And especially if you sort of stick it out on a 10-day course, then it's like
Yeah.
the benefits are pretty undeniable for anyone who finishes the course, you know. So
Yeah. And I mean, the
see why they're
accessibility,
confident like that. But yeah,
yeah, the accessibility built in is, I mean, it's unparalleled. But yeah, so anyways, you know, I did mention on one of my forums, as I was, you know, still really in the framework of Vipassana, but had rediscovered Grof and psychedelic assisted healing, and it was kind of like this overlap. And I attended a course, and they were like, they didn't know what to do with me, you know, because they're like, when you fill out the form, don't lie, like tell the
yeah,
truth. That's part of the foundation of attending this course, your application, like tell the truth, you know. So I mentioned the truth about like you know, experiencing psychedelic medicines, and they were like, they had like a special interview with me and everything, and they didn't know what to do with it, and they were like, you know. And I was like, yeah, that was, I kind of began to tease myself a little bit away from the structure of the community at that point. But it's based on an assumption of like intoxicants are what was around in India at that time, that they felt was not productive to the practice of meditation because
yeah,
it kind of dulls the awareness. Um,
yeah. And also it can you can, you know, if you drink a lot of alcohol, it's gonna impair your ability to act in an ethical way in various other respects. So you're more likely to engage in sexual misconduct or lying, or you know,
so,
it's one of those things. Whereas the the use of psychedelics in the way that they're being used, you know, when they are being used responsibly now, um, maybe a little bit different. So maybe like see what you think about this. Like how I've been thinking about it is, you know, in my, you know, admittedly comparatively limited experience of Vipassana, you know, when I don't like to like support a kind of purity narrative. There's a lot of the Indian traditions will have this idea that the mind is something that needs to be purified, or that the body is something that needs to be purified, you know. And obviously like this can go in a lot of problematic directions when it's kind of rolled out on a sociological scale. Um, and you know, you end up with people who are born with brown skin trying to find ways to make their skin whiter because it gets taken too literally, and it goes in all sorts of really difficult directions. Um, but at the same time, my experience is that when I'm doing the Vipassana meditation, um, you know, that some of the material that comes up and seems to be genuinely released, in my experience, my subjective experience anyway, um, you know, when it goes, it does feel like a defilement of my mind. Once it's gone, it's like, oh, actually, yeah, that I'm not going to tell anybody else that they're impure, but that felt like an impurity, and I feel purer now that it's gone. You know, now that there's a bit less of it in there. Um,
like what, like just, I mean, I'm imagining if somebody's never experienced Vipassana, like what would be like an example of, is like a behavior pattern, or just like a perception?
yeah, I mean, a big one that happens for everybody in their first couple of retreats, right, is like sexual craving. You know, like I assume it happens for everybody. I've heard a lot of people say that it happens for them, and so yeah, you if you go and sit at a Vipassana retreat, something that's pretty common to happen the first couple times is that, and maybe beyond, I don't know, is that you'll see replays in your mind coming up of every sexual fantasy you've had, everything that you desired or did that you that un, but a lot of the time the things that come up are the things that you, when you look back on it, you go, oh, actually, I, on some level, spiritually, I was not okay with that. There was a part of me that was getting off on it, you know, back when I was like fantasizing about it or engaging in it. Um, you know, porn is a huge thing in our culture, and like that, you know, you'll see it, the things that you've watched come up in your Vipassana meditation, and your job is just sit there and don't react, you know, which is you know, it's a pretty simple job. Um, it's challenging, but it's a very simple job. And that stuff starts to go. Um, so anyway, I'm kind of saying all this to get back around to the idea of like, how do we know for ourselves? Strip away the kind of any dogmatic adherence to structures, and the question is like, well, how do I know if I'm okay with it? And there is like something built in like, if I want to know, like, can I still be on this path of Vipassana, for example, and take psychedelics? You know, if I keep practicing, then the things that I'm not okay with are going to come up, and I'm going to know in the moment whether I'm okay with them or not. And that for me, that's like, there is a kind of inbuilt mechanism there in the meditation that like lets you know, like, what your moral compass really is. And it's like, maybe that's a good way for individual people to kind of do that balancing act.
Like around the narrative around purity, like to actually like be free versus like
yeah, well, it's like the rules that, like, I mean, I know we're kind of going specifically about Vipassana here, which is kind of inevitable.
I can
anyway,
definitely jump in, and I've got some things that I want to add from another perspective, but when you guys are ready.
Nice. I'll throw it over to you in a second. What was I going to say? Yeah, just in terms of like, how to determine like what's okay in terms of being reverent and respectful towards the traditions that we're practicing and engaging in, versus our, like, desire to experiment and interweave them with other things. It feels like, yeah, if you're actually engaging in inner work in any way, like, and you're doing real work, one thing that's going to happen as part of that work is the voice of your conscience is going to get a little bit clearer and a little bit louder. And so like at Vipassana, for example, it's 5 rules, that they ask you to follow. It's don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, no sexual misconduct, and no intoxicants. And those seem really, really simple, but actually when you try and put them into practice in a complex world and a complex life, it gets tricky, and it's hard for anyone to truly, like, try not to lie at all, for a year or 10 years. It's going to be tricky. You have to really, really change your behavior so that you're never going to be put in a position where you ever have to lie, because sometimes the kindest thing to do is to lie, right? So if you really want to not lie for a year, that means avoiding all situations where the kindest thing to do is to lie. So you have, anyway. But
Plus,
I think
you also have to have 100% infinite consciousness to not lie.
Good point. But anyway, my what I'm wondering about, where I'm kind of feel myself landing on all of this anyway, is like that feeling of like, yeah, well, if you are doing work, you're doing real introspective work, then you'll start to know more and more what's right and wrong for you as an individual, and perhaps you don't need a kind of 2,000-year-old structure to tell you what's right and wrong if you're really doing the work.
Yeah. I mean, since we're all astrologers, I mean, we can look at this through the Saturn archetype, of course, right? And there are a lot of ways of looking at that, but one of the fundamental things with Saturn is the issue of authority, and is it external authority or is it innate authority, right? And usually I'd say that the progression from a unhealthy, beset by difficulty kind of Saturn to a healthy Saturn, which, I've heard one astrologer put it as like, if you get Saturn right, everything else will fall into place. So and I kind of agree to a certain extent, but moving from the kind of problematic, troubled Saturn to like that sense of strength is moving from a place of like reliance on some kind of external and always arbitrary structure to just hang on to for safety, to being able to let go of that and like withstand the initial terror of freedom to then, discover that, oh, actually, like, like, as soon as I allow myself to be free, I become equally responsible, and I become equally powerful, and and grounded and solid from here. And really, once you start to move in that direction, reliance on those external structures becomes not just difficult but toxic. Like I think that the constant pull back to them, at least in my case, is like, it's always from the part of me that doubts and that still doubts and fears, and doesn't want to be completely free. And the beauty of like what attracts me to Tantra, to the whole Shiva Shakti tradition. And Tantra, it doesn't mean like groovy sex practices. I mean, sex can be a part of Tantra, but in Kundalini, there are sexual qualities to the Kundalini energy and all of that. But my practice is pretty much a solo practice. But essentially, okay, well, there's a great line from the Vijnana Bhairav Tantra, which is one of the key texts in, it's a meditation manual, basically, from Kashmir Shaivism, framed as a dialogue between Shiva and Shakti. And for those who don't know, basically, Shiva is seen as pure, infinite, absolute, still, peaceful, absolute consciousness, and even beyond consciousness, just the source of sources, right? And Shakti is the goddess who is basically all of the dynamism and energy and matter and everything of creation. And really, they're not separate from one another. It's like there is no such thing as Shiva without Shakti. Shakti is the world we experience and the world we don't experience. And we can only come to Shiva through Shakti. And but anyway, in this dialogue, Shiva is telling Shakti, basically, here's how one can realize me. And one of the verses in there, Shiva says, nothing is pure or impure. Too many teachings emphasize this fact. That's meant for basically people of limited understanding. And it's not an elitist thing, but it's just the truth. It's like, when you have certain limits in your understanding, you have to rely on this notion of purity and impurity. When you see through that enough, then you understand what it's meant by nothing is pure or impure. And plus, they also don't dispense with the idea of purity and impurity. Even though they say that, they'll still use the idea of purity and impurity. For example, they'll talk about like Shuddha or Ashuddha Vikalpas, which are basically pure or impure thought forms. And they'll define impure thought forms as those belief patterns, those habits of perception, whatever, that keep you being a limited being. And then the pure thought forms are the ones that move you in the direction of letting go of those. And so, when it comes to stuff like sex or food or money or anything like that, I mean, increasingly in my practice has shown me that it's never about those things. It's never that sex is good or bad. It's never that meat is good or bad, or any kind of food is good or bad. It's never that I shouldn't go and drink or do whatever drug I damn well want to do at this time. It's not even that. It's just, where is that coming from in me? What is that producing in me? What is the kind of vibrational residue of it? And you can feel, it's like you were talking about, John, as it comes up, when your awareness is subtle enough, like you can feel if it's messing you up or not. And it's this sense of what you're creating through it, because everything, it's like, I think a lot in terms of like the, like the 7 laws, there are the 7 hermetic principles, because they're like archetypal astrology. I find them to be just this beautiful framework that helps my mind make sense. And they're Shuddha Vikalpas, right? Pure thought forms. the idea of vibration, the idea of resonance is such a crucial one, because like, you know, sex can be a beautiful way to approach the divine, and tantra does teach that, you know, but it can also be just this you know thing, and you know that when you're in that kind of like, oh yeah baby, kind of vibration, it's just like, oh man, when you catch that in yourself, you're just like, yeah. And there is something impure about it, I mean, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I think especially like, especially with if you give the caveat that like it's only you that gets to decide what's impure about your own material. Then it's
exactly.
like, then yeah,
Yeah.
you can everyone knows what we're talking about. We've all
And
got
perhaps the
that
ultimate
demon.
impurity, you know, the ultimate thing that really messes us up is always looking outside to project the blame or the judgment or whatever, you know, because ultimately it's not about blame and judgment, it's about responsibility. And I think that's the thing that you learn through deep inner work is it's like there's a big difference between blame and responsibility, and clearly our world doesn't know that. You know, I mean, identity politics, the whole red and blue thing, everything, it's all about blame, right? And people will say that it's about responsibility, but they don't even know what that means, you know.
Yeah, that comes back to the Saturnian piece inside
Yeah,
yourself you mentioned. Integration of the Saturnian authority, that
yeah.
response.
Yeah. And it is a scary thing, you know, it's that idea of like the dweller at the threshold, that at a certain point, you know, in the tantric tradition, that appears as Bhairava, the fierce form of Shiva, who like at the moment you're about to tip over into absolute, you know, whoom, you know, drop into the void, you encounter basically a condensation of like all your negative karma. And like there's no way around it but through it and to face it. And you know, it's like shadow work to the nth degree, right? And and it requires this like, and it's something that you learn through any deep meditative practice, and Vipassana for sure would get you there, you know. And I was thinking that the best definition that I can give for what transcendence really is becoming absolutely at peace with not being at peace. You know what I mean? It's like so often we're trying to just be okay, you know, and we're trying to achieve this 100% like, oh, I'm there, you know, and it's like, no, you know, there's no such thing as a permanent state of absolute perfection. Maybe you taste that and it is eternal, but then you come back into life, and you know, I'm sure even the most enlightened people have their ups and downs, and it's just how do you relate to that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of experience of meeting the depths of your own ugliness and fear and all of that, and just being like, okay, I can live with that. You know, that's like a real deep Saturn lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well put.
Yeah. I mean, I guess seeing as we're having the Saturn conversation and we're talking about meditation and transcendence, and we're in the under the spell of a Saturn Neptune conjunction, I guess we should also mention the Neptune piece of all this. Um, I'm always so struck by how Saturn Neptune a practice the Vipassana thing is, because it's so stripped back and minimal. It's just like, okay, you're here, welcome. First 3.5 days, what you're going to do is just watch the end of your nose and don't move. Don't talk, don't do anything, and that's it. That's all you're getting. And then afterwards, like, okay, we got through that, so now you're just going to watch the rest of your body, and yeah, just keep not talking, not moving. So that all feels very, very much like a very Saturnian way to approach the divine, or to approach the kind of the possibility of inner peace, even if it is being at peace with not being at peace. which is a great way of saying it. Um,
Yeah.
I guess I feel like there's it's worth saying that a lot of, Alex, what you were talking about in terms of like intention and whether the place that our stuff is coming from. And it feels like another great role of meditation is like it can just give you an easy way to constantly reaffirm your contact with, whether it's however you put it, whether it's gods and goddesses or the divine or the sacred or just a sense of inner peace. Give you contact, kind of direct line to the Neptune archetype in its pure form, which then results in a bit less, maybe not, maybe not that much less to begin with, but even just a bit less, like craving for the shitty substitutes of the Neptune archetype.
Yeah. Well put.
Definitely.
Yeah, that description, the Saturn Neptune description of Vipassana it feels appropriate. And even the actual practice, like when you take it down to the real micro level where it's like, after the fourth day, I think it is, or the third day, you start focusing on sensations and you're really observing material interactions, like actual sensations, and which is like, like literally like molecular interactions, movements in your body, your physical substance, hormonal shifts, and you're observing that to experience that has no ultimate permanent kind of lasting substrate to it. It's all just, you're witnessing fluctuation. So on the other side of that is something that's formless. You're watching form at its most microscopic level that you can experience inside your body, and to experience that which has no form, which is more Neptunian. Yeah.
Yeah, it really tickles me, like the idea that you just that, especially as a counterbalance to my psychedelic work, it's just I'm just going to observe physical processes, and philosophically I'm so often like, oh, the goddamn physical world, you know oh, the Saturnian constraints of material reality, oh, how boring. But then it turns out if you just look at them, if you just observe material reality as close as with as even a mind as you can, and say, I'm not adding any imaginative material to this. I'm not, I'm doing everything I can to not introduce anything weird or wacky. I'm just looking. I'm just looking at matter itself. That's all I'm interested in. And then, like, within 5 days, you're kind of there. And then, you start off doing the body scan, day 4. And to begin with, your mind is like this, or for me anyway, it's like I had this little scientist with a clipboard, like going around going, okay, what's going on up here? We got some tingling going on here. Forehead is hot. Somehow left side is warmer. Right side is cooler. Feels a bit more tight on the right hand side, and then go through the whole body piece by piece, just making these, just jotting stuff down. But then, kind of by the end of day 5, this this very objective scientist has completely gone, and like instead I start the meditation, put my attention at the top of my head, and there's like a a kind of vibrating feeling, and then you almost just tell it to go down, and it just goes whoa, and just moves down through the body. It's like, this, how did this happen? How did I get to this point? And for the whole second half of my 10-day this time, and for like a good long week afterwards, whenever I sat still and closed my eyes, or stood still and closed my eyes, or even just stood still and paid attention, I had this feeling that the whole interior of my body felt like it was just water, just liquid sloshing around, I felt like yeah, like a tank of water in the back of a moving vehicle. I had to go and say to the teacher at one point, like, can you keep an eye on me and tell me tomorrow if I'm moving, if I'm like swaying, because I can't tell. Like I can't tell if my body is doing this or if I'm just this. You know, I'm trying to do this, but I, with my eyes closed, I don't even know. Sometimes you go, what? And then you know, but the whole rest of the time, I can't
So
even
were you
tell.
moving or not?
I don't think so. I think there's a little bit of movement, you know, but nowhere near as much as I was perceiving. And like whenever I went to bed, and like I say, for the whole week afterwards, it was I closed my eyes and lie on my back, and it's like I was floating on the surface of the ocean. It's like, and so that's why one of the things I meant when I said earlier, you know, meditation is a trip in itself. Yeah, you know, you can, but it does it. Like I say, it really tickles me that you can get into that kind of state just by trying to be as cold and precise and objectively minded as possible and doing nothing except examining matter at the level of matter. Um, so yeah, that whole concept of going through Saturn into Neptune, that way going through solid into liquid, like it really happened for me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But
You know, I'd like to share a little bit about like, because I think
Sorry,
it might be
can I
useful.
add one more thing before I just that I meant to say, or that it feels responsible to say at least. Like in Vipassana, those kinds of experiences are really not the aim. You know, and if you go and if you go and tell your teacher, oh, I had a out of body experience yesterday afternoon in the meditation, you know, and I floated up to the hall and I looked down at everybody, and they're most likely thing they're going to say to you is, oh yeah, that can happen. Don't pay any attention to it. You know, nothing special is like a favorite phrase of like many of the assistant teachers at Vipassana. It seems like it's nothing special. You know, what your job is to do is just remain objective, remain alert. You know, yep, okay, you're floating on the ceiling. Um, just keep paying attention. Just keep paying attention. Keep doing the practice. So obviously that's very different to what you do in psychedelic therapy, which is like when something is happening, make it bigger, go into it, let it be amplified. So there's perhaps there's an area one day to explore how that crosses over, but maybe not right now. Yeah, thanks, Alex. What were you going to say?
Yeah, so well, the last thing that you just said made me think of something else. So,
Sorry.
I think no, it's fine. That the cultivating the ability to observe whatever is happening. And I think Vipassana is probably like the most hardcore version of that out there that people are likely to find, or the one that insists most directly on that, and like here's how to just like really lay the groundwork for that. Vipassana is great for that, obviously, and I will be doing I've been meaning to do a 10-day course for a while, and I just
do it while Saturn Neptune is do it while Saturn Neptune is in effect. And anyone listening who wants to find a way to honor this transit, especially if it's hitting your natal chart.
Also Saturn Neptune Jupiter Saturn Neptune T-square.
Yeah.
Anyways, go on.
Yeah. So but the thing, in my own meditation practice, the thing that really made everything else click, and that no matter what I do, if it's subtle body work or if I'm working with mantras or anything like that, it's always based in observation, and it's always with the ultimate intention that I'm not trying to achieve a state. I mean, it's a similar idea of that. It's not that there's a particular state to achieve, that I am going to be present for whatever's happening, completely as possible. And the one difference, I guess, or the major difference, is that physical matter isn't seen as being more essentially real than any other level of experience. And so, you know, a great practice that I do that I've woven into my practice, and this comes from it comes from this work called Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden. And I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he was a you know, occultist in the mid 20th century, who wrote this book that basically, like, it outlines a very solid progression for like how you can work with these states and everything. And something akin to Vipassana is basically the groundwork of the whole teaching. But one teacher that I studied with a little bit, who came from this tradition, recommended doing these 2-minute rounds of close observation, and then 2 minutes of journaling, 2 minutes of close observation, 2 minutes of journaling, 2 minutes of close observation, 2 minutes of journaling. The first time I did it, it was five minutes each, and then we're working up to 10. But when I worked back to these 2-minute things, it's like maybe I'll do like a 20-minute segment of just like alternating, like watching the flow of thought, and then, you know, tuning into ever subtler gradations of like, how does thought seem to touch the mental space? What happens, you know, in my body, you know, what sensations arise, you know, what directions does the thoughts seem to be coming from, what types of thoughts draw other thoughts to, you know, all that sort of thing. And you make notes as you go, but you do it in this alternating rhythm, so that you're not so that you're actually able to look back over it afterward and kind of review it and learn from it. And then when you go in again, you've got more of a framework to begin your observation from. Then you extend it to all of the 5 senses, and then you can start to extend it into, like, you know, say I'm working with the third eye. You know, people can have a lot of preconceptions about the third eye, that like I'm supposed to be experiencing like all kinds of crazy tunnels of light and geometries, and that can happen. But the way for me that really started to activate the third eye was just tuning into the feeling of seeing, and that feeling that, like, it's that same sense that you have when you go, oh, I see. You know, it's that part of you that gets something that like you know, intuitively, or like as an astrologer that just like sees that pattern, right? It's like there's a particular vibration to that. There's a sense of that exists, that like, when you become aware of it and you just make that the kind of basis of your meditation, then something starts to happen here, where it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's more light. Oh, there's more tingling. Oh, I'm moving now. And then it's like, okay, once that happens, it's not like, woo, necessarily. It's like, okay, here's another thing to observe. And so, yeah, it you know, then that has changed the way I approach psychedelics now too, because it's like, it's interesting because I'm kind of 2 minds on psychedelics. There's a part of me that goes back to it in that kind of cathartic way of just like, whatever's there, I'm going to amplify it and it's going to be healing and everything. There's another part of me that's like, I can actually navigate these spaces, and like, should something be coming, and it's not a matter of control necessarily, but say like, you know, once you start to learn the vibrational nature of reality and how your thoughts and feelings and where you choose to put your attention and in what manner, how that actually starts to just go and kind of create reality, right? Then you start to, in psychedelic states, you start to become very aware of how that happens, and you can play around with it, like almost like if you're sitting there and you're watching the whole, you know, all the colors and the geometry, and then you just go, you know, anger, and you just shoot anger into the field, and you see what happens, and you feel, and then you go love, and then you see what happens. I'm not recommending everybody do that, but it's possible, and it's interesting, and it's not just for fun and curiosity. You can bring a lesson back into life from that. Like, one of the greatest lessons I ever learned was I was doing LSD with a friend of mine in the desert, and the two of us we're like spiritual brothers, and so we're out there in the desert, and we're there, and we're meditating together, and we're in this very, very subtle state. And then my partner we were having trouble at the time, and like, and we have a great relationship, but like we were having some conflict at the time, and I could like feel her walk out into the desert from like 200 yards like behind me, and I could just feel her coming, and I could feel her mood, and I was just fuck, like I was like, man, Nico and I are sitting here like getting the most sudden, we're there, baby, and like she comes out just like boom, boom, and I'm just like, God damn it, and like I feel like all my subtle bodies just contract, and like and then Nico felt it too, and then like she comes up and we have a kind of exchange, and we get into this argument and everything, and I'm like, come on, like I'm on acid here. Like, leave me alone. Like, let me have my experience. And Nico's like, come on, like, come over here. And we walk up a hill, and we sit there, and we're looking at this whole view of the mountains together. And it's like both of us are seeing the same thing. And it's like the whole world is just this swirling fractal energy. It's like Van Gogh's Starry Night plus the Mandelbrot set, just like, and like we're both seeing it, the same thing together, and like and I'm feeling my state is still contracted, and I can feel how the energy around me, and I can visually see it is just like this like dense. It's like there's a stone in a river, and Nico's like, hey, lead me on that practice on the gratitude practice that you teach, which is this. It's a very simple practice of remembering a time that you did something very just unbidden, out of nowhere, you did something kind for somebody else, and they thanked you genuinely, and so in the practice, you just for like a minute just put yourself back in one of these moments, and then you feel yourself receiving the gratitude before you go into thinking about what you're grateful for. So I start leading him on this practice, and as I'm doing it, I'm remembering such a scene from my life, and at the moment that I feel the person say thank you, it's like that whole knot that had been just condensing me ever since that thing happened. It goes, and then all of the energy, all that starry nights of just go, and after that, I was just like, holy shit, like I got something about the nature of energy and emotion, and what you can bring to it, what you have the ability to choose to do, is a lot. You have a lot more leeway than I previously had thought. And so like so now in my sessions, it's like sometimes something comes up where we just like, boy, if I don't surrender to this, like I'm dead meat, and like so like there's nothing to do but just like lay back and like let it wash through. But at other times, in these more minor ways, you can play with it. And yeah, so anyway, that was kind of a long-winded thing, but I think it's this developing subtle awareness, and then being able to take it to different places is something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I guess you kind of touched on it there, but I guess like thinking about heading towards the landing of this pretty far out conversation, and like somewhere to land. I guess like I mentioned to you both before we started recording, like me personally, and I know a lot of people like the idea of meditation, aspire to keep up a practice, struggle to do it, and yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just throwing it out there to see if either of you has any words of encouragement or wisdom or suggestions, or or just like maybe speaking to why it's worth it to have a practice, even if it's only something very short and simple. Yeah, it's certainly, for my part, it's helped me, like I was saying, it just maintain that connection with the Neptune archetype, so I'm not always looking for other ways to fill the hole that is left by its absence when I'm not making that effort. So in a way, it almost doesn't really matter what I do. Just watching the breath coming in, going out, noticing how that's the world becoming me, you know, that's the oxygen in the air going, it's becoming me, and it's me going out, becoming the world. Such a simple thing to do. And even if I can only do it for 5 minutes, you know, it it gives me that reminder of that, the kind of fundamental, you know, lack of boundary between me and the universe, which is what on some level my soul is always craving. And when I don't have it, you know, I'm much more prone to go looking for substitutes, even if it's something completely banal, like just scrolling through Facebook, or you know, just watching 4 episodes of some Netflix show in a row, accidentally staying up until 2, and then kind of screwing up my timetable for the rest of the week. You know, so that's my 2 cents. I'll leave it to you guys to offer anything that you have to offer.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in here with you know, first, just as a nod to what you were saying, Alex, like you know, you're really kind of touching upon this piece around like kind of just observing and just being mindful versus like playing a more active role in our process of insight in the present. And I think that's a great just topic to sink our teeth into, like you did. It's really there with the Vipassana community. They're aware of it. You know, I think the psychedelic assisted healing community is becoming aware of it. It's a subtle exploration that, you know, I think there is a way to navigate that. I think you did a good, you know, good kind of very kind of articulate exploration of that. So I just wanted to say that, and then kind of to hop on to what you were saying, Jon, about encouragement for people who are starting a meditation practice. You know, my particular way I would package that encouragement is, you know, it may sound maybe perhaps archaic, but I'm going to give it a shot anyways, because I feel it's as if I'm addressing myself maybe 20 years ago. Or if there's somebody out there that is listening that is in a similar place that I was 20 years ago, you know, not only why to start a meditation practice, but also why astrology? You know, why astrology? Why psychedelics? You know, it seems kind of, you know, depending on your perspective, might seem extreme, and astrology might seem really far out there. And I would actually kind of approach from a reverse side and say, like, if you wanted to just bring in a mindfulness practice into your life just for the sake of fun, from my perspective, the way I would encourage people to think about it at the moment is, why not start an astrology practice? Because a mindfulness practice, you know, sure, you know, like start a mindfulness practice any amount of time that you can manage in a day. I would say though, or if you could do Vipassana, of course, great. But like, I would say if you start an astrology practice, what you're then doing is you're offering yourself an opportunity to practice mindfulness at any point in the day in a way that I feel is very fun and fascinating and interactive. Because, you know, the why to that kind of is in the connection between Vipassana, psychedelics, and astrology. Like, why, or mindfulness meditation, psychedelics, and astrology, like why would I lump those things together? And that's a question that I would, you know, my younger self just starting out practicing Vipassana would definitely ask. because I would be like, what are you talking about astrology? You know what I mean? Like when I started practicing Vipassana, I was like, this is it, man. This is it. Like I'm gonna dedicate my life to this. Is great. Psychedelics, maybe, sure, but or maybe not, but astrology, like what is going on there? And so what I would say is in mindfulness practice, and especially in Vipassana practice, we're just aware in the present moment. In Vipassana, we're aware of sensations in the body in the present moment. And we see something that comes up in our awareness, if our eyes are open, like a person or an event that we witness or hear, or if it's a thought that comes up, our eyes are closed, thought that comes up in the mind, the sensations arise according to how the mind categorizes that thing. Like a person that I really enjoy spending time with, positive sensation comes up, and I begin to see that, oh, the external world is perceived is actually perceived internally. Like the whole what I experience as the external world is actually an internal phenomenon that's happening to me, that because I'm not aware of it at the time, it feels like I'm like, oh, this person is inherently like this situation is inherently good, it's inherently bad. But actually what I'm witnessing is my own mind, psychosomatic system experience and perception, and it's getting kind of generalized into this outer world. And the reason why I bring that up is because why look at something so far away in space to understand something about myself? Why look at the planets? Because kind of a lesson of Vipassana is that the inner and the outer is not, it's not really like that. It's not this kind of like this hard line materialist perspective of like the inner me inside this skin, the outer world. It looks like there's a distinction that's pretty clear, but there is not actually ultimately a distinction like that. So when I look out at the planets and I look at space, it's reflecting of my inner space. It's reflecting of my experience of my inner space. And so when I see the movements of the planets, I'm seeing also my inner space, my inner experience. They're reflective of each other. And then when I look on the stage of my life, I'm seeing the archetypes, the astrological archetypes unfolding around me. And that's also my astrological archetypes. That's my life kind of evolving and growing. I'm seeing it happen on the stage around me. And so that's the meeting point of these three practices, is like, or specifically Vipassana and archetypal astrology, because the mindfulness is there, is like, I'm mindful in the present moment. I could have my eyes closed, be meditating, or I could have my eyes open and looking at the world around me. Either way, I'm mindfulness of my life. Like I'm mindful of my life. And I can see how what's happening outside in the world, the people, the events, the situations, is not separate from me. It's also me. It's also my life. There's one continuum. And so that's why I suggest the practice of astrology actually is a meditation practice, because then when you look at your transits, you look at what archetypal tensions are there, and then you look in your life and you see them coming up, you can be mindful. You can see like, oh, this is my life. It's not like there's, my life was going great and then this thing came out of nowhere, and like I'm a victim, and it's like, oh, this is my life. This it's supported by my transits. I look at my transits, they're reflecting this back to me. Yes, this is my life. Let me be mindful of it without reacting immediately. Let me see like, oh, this is also part of my life story of growth. And so, yeah, so then, that's kind of, I guess, my landing point there with like meditation practice, and then you can inject psychedelics later on, which is, like I guess maybe a little bit longer discussion, but it'll just ramp up the intensity of the insights and the kind of archetypal tensions that they come up. So it's still the same practice of mindfulness, so same practice, eyes closed looking within, or eyes open looking outside. It's the same practice, but just the intensity and the accelerated encounter. The encounter with the growth process that's happening is accelerated and intensified with work with psychedelics. So yeah, so
awesome.
Yeah,
I really like that. And you know, like I was talking earlier about ecologies of practice, you know, and this idea that everybody, like, truly, if you're depressed or you're anxious or like whatever your problem is, it's likely that that problem, whatever it is that's causing you suffering, is not something you can overcome or really improve by just tackling it head on with one thing, you know, because really that issue, that suffering, is like a network or a constellation of things in the psyche or in the mind. And like just by hitting one node on the network, you know, it leaves so much room for whatever that complex is to adapt and work around whatever solution you're trying to impose. And really what's needed, I mean, and again, I have to like credit John Vervaeke with this way of talking about it. And people should check out his lecture series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. I don't agree with him on every point, but I think he's really smart, and I appreciate that series a lot. If you got 50 or so hours to spare, but you know, he kind of points out what you really need is a counteractive complex, you know, one that's just as complicated, has just as many facets, you know, as the negative complexes that are causing you misery, one that's pulling in the opposite direction. Or in like the terms of Vipassana, it's like stop turning the wheel of your misery and start turning the wheel of Dharma. You know, and I'm sure we could do similar translations into every spiritual framework. And something that's super cool about astrology, archetypal astrology in particular, is that like it's an inner compass. It points towards all the different parts of you, you know. So if what you need is a multifaceted system, or ecology of practices that helps you to counteract the kind of misery generating complexes, then yeah, you need it to include all the different areas of life that the astrological archetypes help to point you in the direction of. So, you know, you need a practice that enhances, gives you a way to express yourself creatively to honor the sun. I mean, this won't be exhaustive, but I'll just do it quickly. You know, you need something that's going to help you to honor your emotions and your body, for the moon. You know, you need something that's going to nourish and stimulate your mind for Mercury. You need something that's going to help you with your relationships for Venus. You need like something that's going to enhance your vitality and your bravery and courage and give you a place to express like a healthy masculinity for Mars. You know, you need a practice that's going to help you to feel gratitude and be generous for Jupiter. You need something that's going to help you to be grounded and respectful and reverent for Saturn. You know, I won't finish. You can fill in the blanks, but the wonderful thing about archetypal astrology is that it's such a complete set of symbols and a system that really helps to suggest what kind of practices you might be needing in any given moment. And if you know how to track your transits, or if you like have a you know, a session with an astrologer who can help you understand what transits you're going through, then you also can time this so that you're doing things at a time when you're not going against the tide, you know, but going with it. So yeah, thanks for bringing all that in, James, because it made me have all those thoughts, which is things I wanted to say anyway. I'll leave it to you, Alex, to have the final word.
Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, there's some things that have popped into my mind since you guys have been talking. I mean, first of all, for me, the most amazing gift that, well, astrology gives a lot of gifts, but one of them is that it teaches you to begin to perceive the world in a different way, right? To like I was talking about that kind of third eye kind of vision, which it really is. And I've come to as I've come to reflect on it more, and I've like worked with the subtle body, and I've like really worked with these practices and open vision up in that way. I've seen the way that astrology prepared the ground for me, and also became a way to help integrate that vision, because it basically you're starting to see a layer to reality, an archetypal plane, right? That is real. I mean, it really is real. It's not imaginary. And whether you want to, however you want to digest that philosophically, if you want to say it's not real without becoming immanent, that who cares? Really, like honestly, like you could just enter into that level of experience and get something of use from it, and for me, like that's the bottom line with all the practices. So another thing is that astrology shows you the kinds of, if we want to think of reality or consciousness or whatever as like a big kind of ever moving sea, a kind of ocean of various currents, astrology is a way to quite literally read what those currents are. But as you become subtle through practices, you learn more and more to feel those. And so you can, it's like I can almost like feel like I don't often check my transits anymore, but I can definitely know if I'm having a Mars transit, for instance. I'll be like, the hell is Mars doing today? And then I'll pull up my chart and be like, square my sun. Okay, there you go. Because there's like, if you're doing a tandem practice of astrology and any kind of meditative observation work, you start to become very sensitive to how these currents hit you. And then also, as your own work deepens and you grow, you start to see that you respond to the same stimuli in very different ways from year to year, So that's another thing that it teaches you, that reality, because I think a danger with astrology can be that you get too locked up in what your concepts of the planets are and all of that. And it becomes just like a purely mental framework. But all the best teachings on astrology, they invite you to open to deeper and deeper layers of things. So I wanted to say that. And then as far as like establishing a meditation practice, how to get started, how to navigate the resistance at the beginning, I'd say have fun with it. If you're not enjoying it, now if you go and sit for 10 days, it's going to be miserable at certain points, obviously. And there is a point to putting yourself through that misery. But honestly, like something happened for me at a certain point where I struggled off and on for years, literally like a decade, like kind of, meditating sometimes, not meditating sometimes, not meditating. When something clicked for me at a certain point where I started to just enjoy it. It became like, I wouldn't ask somebody, oh, how can I find 20 minutes to go hang out with my best friend? Or how can I find, I don't know if I've got time to get into that hot tub right now. It's like I just want to do that stuff. And it's very similar with meditation at this point. And, until you have kind of crossed the threshold where you go, oh, okay, so this is what it is. It can be, there can be a lot of resistance. As far as crossing that threshold goes, I'd say that the number one thing that keeps people from progressing in meditation is the belief that having a bunch of thoughts means you can't meditate. If you've got a bunch of thought, it's true that if you're just following a train of thought, you're not really doing it. You got to, once you catch yourself having a thought, you just release it and come back to whatever your object of meditation is. But really, when you just allow that to be what it is, it becomes a lot easier to see that like many teachers from many traditions talk about it this way, that thoughts are essentially like waves on the surface of the ocean, right? And the ocean can be stormy, it can be calm, whatever. All you have to do is just go down right below the surface, and it immediately becomes more still. And the deeper you go, the stiller it becomes. When you make the connection that you can have all kinds of shit going on the surface of the mind, and that can the surface of the mind can be and it can be that, and you can still touch stillness behind that. Like, that's the thing that when that clicked for me, I was just like, oh my God, I can meditate. Like it took me like 10 years to get to that point. And then once I did that, I realized, oh, I can tune to that stillness no matter what insanity my mind is up to. And eventually that insanity will die down a certain amount. Some days it won't go as far. Other days it'll be like, whoa, like there was nothing there. Like, but you can be as ADHD as anybody and still meditate once you make that connection. So yeah, and so I just have that in mind, and then just realize that, like, if you do that, then pretty soon you're going to taste that thing that's like getting into a hot tub or like spending time with somebody you love, and then it becomes something you don't want to not do. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, it seems like a great place to end our conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and
I'm here.
yeah, thank you guys so for making the time.
That's great.
So I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as we enjoyed having that conversation together, exploring that terrain. It really was a pleasure for me, and I think for James and Alex as well. If you want to know more about their work, you can check out their websites. They'll be down in the description below. James and Alex, as well as me, we will offer astrological readings, of course, and check out Alex's other offerings as well with regards to coaching and guidance, especially for those people who would like to pursue kind of a daily meditation practice. Alex is a font of inspiration and wisdom with such things. For my part, I'd also like to mention the course that I'm going to be running, which I'm very excited about, starting in September. It's called Soul Work. You can read about it on my website. There'll be a link in the description as well. There's going to be a mixture of astrological presentations, readings, also one-to-one contact with me, as well as meditation and contemplative practice, group sessions where there's going to be sharing, group dialogue practices, neurodynamic breathwork session, and yeah, just lots of opportunities for participating in a healthy and supportive community of like-minded people. It will also function really well as a psychedelic integration circle for anyone who's doing their own medicine work and would like somewhere that's safe and insight generating kind of place to explore whatever experiences you have been having. I think that's all from me for now. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.